Did you know that the first number you see on a house listing can influence the price you pay, more than the actual condition of the property? Or that your very first salary could be creating an invisible ceiling on your earning potential for decades to come? Most of us believe we're rational people, that we make decisions based on value, analysis, and logic. We weigh the pros and cons. We compare and contrast. But what if I told you that one of the most powerful cognitive biases, the anchoring effect, is secretly steering your most important choices? This isn't just a cheap marketing trick. It's a fundamental glitch in your brain's operating system, a form of cognitive gravity that is pulling your judgment off course without you even realizing it. It's an invisible rope tied to an invisible weight, and it's holding you back. In this video, we're not just going to learn what it is, we're going to expose how it shapes your world, from the coffee you buy to the way you value yourself. And most importantly, I'm going to give you the blueprint to pull up that anchor and take back control. Let's take a deep dive into your own mind. So what exactly is this cognitive gravity? At its simplest, the anchoring effect is our innate human tendency to rely way too heavily on the first piece of information offered anchor when making decisions. Once that anchor is dropped, every judgment, every thought, every negotiation that follows happens in its orbit. Imagine you're shopping for a jacket. You walk into a fancy store, just browsing. The first one you see is priced at $500. You scoff, no way. You don't even consider buying it. But it's too late. The $500 anchor has been dropped in your mind. As you keep walking and see another, pretty nice jacket for $150. Your brain doesn't compare it to the jacket's objective value. It doesn't ask, is this jacket worth $150? Instead, it compares it to the $500 anchor. And suddenly, $150 feels like an incredible bargain. You feel smart, like you just saved $350 when in reality, you might have just spent $150 on a jacket that's only worth $70. Here's another one. You're at the grocery store. There's a sign on a display of canned soup that says, limit 12 per customer. You might not even need soup, but your brain is immediately anchored to the number 12. Wow, this must be a good deal, you think. People must be buying a lot, and instead of buying 0 cans, you might buy 4 or 5. That completely arbitrary number 12 created a context, an anchor, that made buying a few cans seem like a rational, savvy move. The store didn't sell you soup. They sold you a number. The most incredible thing about the anchoring effect is that the anchor doesn't have to be rational. It doesn't even have to be relevant to the decision at hand. And that's the scariest part, as to legendary psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky discovered in a classic experiment that completely changed how we understand human thought. Their story takes us to our next act, where we uncover the origins of this powerful cognitive illusion. Let's travel back to the 1970s. Here, two Israeli psychologists, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, were starting a revolution. They weren't studying complex mental disorders. They were interested in the glitches, the small errors in the everyday thinking of normal, intelligent people. Imagine you're a student participating in one of their most famous experiments. You walk into a room. Kahneman and Tversky greet you with a seemingly out-of-place item, a wheel of fortune, the kind you see at carnivals, numbered 0 to 100. We're going to spin this wheel, they say, and then we'll ask you 2 questions. You nod, perhaps a bit confused. They spin the wheel. It clicks, and stops on the number 65. Now for the first question, is the percentage of African nations in the United Nations higher or lower than 65%? Pause for a moment. Your rational brain knows that this number, 65, is completely random. It has nothing to do with geopolitics or the composition of the UN. It's just a number from a toy. You answer the question, probably lower. Then comes the second, crucial question. So, what do you think the actual percentage is? You think. You search your general knowledge. You give an estimate. What you don't realize is that your brain has been hijacked. That random number 65 That anchor has latched onto your mind and is starting to pull. Here is the stunning result they found. The group of people for whom the wheel landed on a high number, like 65, gave a median estimate of 45%. But another group, for whom the rigged wheel landed on a low number, 10, gave a median estimate of just 25%. A completely random number dramatically shifted the answers of intelligent people. It was undeniable proof. Our brains don't just discard information. Even when we know it's meaningless, it latches onto the first piece of information and adjusts from there. That is the anchoring effect. So, why does our brain do this? Why is such a sophisticated information processing machine so easily swayed by an arbitrary number? The answer lies in the brain's fundamental need for efficiency. Your brain is a loafer. It consumes a huge amount of energy, so it has evolved countless mental shortcuts, called heuristics, to make quick decisions without having to analyze everything from scratch. Most of the time, these shortcuts work beautifully, but sometimes they lead to systematic errors known as cognitive biases. The anchoring effect is one of the most powerful. It works through a two-step process. First is anchoring. When you encounter a number, your brain immediately considers it as a plausible starting point. This is automatic and subconscious. It's like dropping an anchor in uncharted waters. It gives you a reference point, a place to start. Second is adjustment. After the anchor is set, your brain begins to adjust away from it. The problem is, this adjustment is almost always insufficient. We move away from the anchor, but we stay within its gravitational field. Its cognitive gravity is too strong. We think we're thinking independently, but we're really tethered by an invisible rope to that initial starting point. Dan Ariely, a brilliant behavioral economist, called this phenomenon arbitrary coherence. Arbitrary because the initial anchor can be anything. Coherent because once that anchor is set, we begin to build a logical structure of decisions around it. In a wonderful experiment, Ariely had students write down the last digits of their social security number. Then he had them bid on items like a bottle of wine or a box of chocolates. The result? The students with higher two-digit numbers bid significantly more, sometimes up to 346% more, than those with lower numbers. Their social security number became a completely arbitrary anchor for the value they were willing to pay. This shows that it's not just our first decision that's affected, but a whole chain of subsequent decisions are also anchored to that arbitrary starting point, creating an illusion of rationality and coherence. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, I get it, but this only applies to people who don't know about it, right? If I'm conscious of it, I should be immune. This is one of the most unsettling aspects of the anchoring effect. Knowing about it is not enough to disable it. Numerous studies have been done on experts, people who are supposed to make objective decisions. One famous study gave real estate agents the same detailed packet of information about a house. The only difference was the list price they were given. The result? The real estate professionals were heavily influenced by the list price, even as they claimed they had ignored it and relied solely on their professional analysis. The anchor swayed their expert valuation. In another study, even experienced legal judges were swayed. When asked to give a hypothetical sentence, judges who were anchored to a higher number by a prosecutor's demand gave significantly longer sentences than those anchored to a lower number. So, why is this? Because the anchor doesn't operate on a conscious level. It's an automatic process of our system, one thinking the fast, intuitive, and emotional part of our brain. Our rational, slow, and analytical part, system 2, can try to fight back, but it's often too slow and effortful to completely escape the pull of the initial anchor. Another important nuance is that the power of the anchor depends on ambiguity. The more uncertain the situation, the more we will rely on an anchor. If you have no idea what a used car is truly worth, the seller's first asking price has enormous power. So, why does any of this matter? Because the anchoring effect isn't just a labrum parlor trick. It is shaping your life every single day in ways you might not realize. These are the primal stakes. Let's talk about your career and your income. When you go for your first job interview out of college, you probably don't have much negotiation experience. The company makes an offer. That number, high or low, becomes a powerful anchor not just for that job, but for your entire career trajectory. At your next negotiation at a different company, you will adjust based on your old salary. That anchor can follow you for decades, costing you hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars over your working life, all because you started from a low reference point. Consider major financial decisions. When buying a home, the list price is the anchor. It sets the entire range for negotiation. A ridiculously high list price can make a discounted price that is still too high seem reasonable. When buying a car, the MSRP manufacturer's suggested retail price on the window is a deliberately engineered anchor to make any price below it feel like a window. It even affects our health and well-being. A doctor who hears about one particular symptom first may become anchored to an initial diagnosis, potentially overlooking other possibilities. In relationships, a first impression can create a positive or negative anchor, coloring how we interpret all of that person's future behaviors. These are not small issues. These are the building blocks of a life. Without being aware of these anchors, we are not truly the captains of our own ship. We are merely passengers on a vessel being pulled by invisible currents. But there is good news. Once you can see the anchors, you can learn to pull them up. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the next section, the blueprint to take back control. Understanding the problem is only half the battle. The real power comes from knowing how to fight it. Becoming a conscious decision maker isn't about having a perfect brain. It's about having a better toolkit. Here are 4 powerful strategies for your toolkit to pull up the anchor and navigate freely. Strategy 1. Drop your own anchor first. This is the offensive strategy, and it's the most effective in negotiations. Whoever controls the anchor controls the conversation. In a salary negotiation, never wait for them to give the first number. Do your research on the market value for your role, your experience, and your location. Then, you make the first offer. Make it ambitious, yet defensible. By doing so, you are no longer adjusting from their low offer. They are now struggling to adjust from your high anchor. This changes the entire dynamic of the negotiation. The same principle applies when selling an item or negotiating a contract. Be the one who sets the reference point. Strategy 2. Drop multiple anchors to dilute the original. When you can't be the first to drop an anchor, the next best strategy is to weaken the power of the existing one. A lone anchor has immense power, but in the presence of multiple anchors, their individual pull is diffused. If you're buying a house and are anchored to the list price, actively seek out other reference points. Don't just ask, is this house worth $500,000? Ask, what was the recent sale price of 3 similar homes in this neighborhood? What is the estimated cost of repairs? What is the potential rental value? Each new data point is a new anchor. By deliberately bringing multiple reference points into the conversation, you free your brain from its fixation on a single number. Strategy 3. Pause, reset, and reevaluate from 0. When you feel the pull of an anchor, that feeling of wow, this seems like a good price compared to trigger a mental circuit breaker. Stop. Physically step away from the situation, if only for a few minutes. During this pause, perform a thought exercise called zero-based reevaluation. Consciously ask yourself, if I had never seen this number, what value would I place on this item, service, opportunity, based on what I truly know about it? Force yourself to build a valuation from the ground up with no initial reference point. This process helps to reset your perspective and allows the rational system to part of your brain to catch up. Strategy 4. Actively consider the opposite and alternatives. Our brain clings to the anchor because it provides an easy answer. To fight this, force your brain to do more work by actively seeking reasons why the anchor might be wrong. If a salesperson anchors you at a $1,000 price point, don't just ask why is it worth $1,000. Ask, what are some reasons it might only be worth $500? Argue the other side's case in your own head. Similarly, consider your alternatives. Negotiators call this the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. An item's true value isn't an abstract number. It's related to the cost of your next best option. By focusing on your alternatives, you shift your focus away from the anchor and onto reality. Using these tools takes practice, but every time you recognize an anchor and choose one of these strategies, you are retraining your brain. You are moving from being a victim of your unconscious biases to being a deliberate architect of your decisions. Today, we've taken a journey deep into one of the most fundamental glitches of the human brain. We've seen that the anchoring effect, or cognitive gravity, isn't just a psychological curiosity. It is an active force that shapes our decisions, influences our finances, and even sets the limits on our potential. We saw how a random number from a wheel of fortune could distort our perception of the world. We learned that our brain, in its quest for efficiency, can lead us astray. And we exposed how these anchors operate silently in our salary negotiations, our purchasing decisions, and our professional judgments. But the story doesn't end there. The real transformation begins now. It begins the next time you recognize that list price anchor, the next time you question that first offer, the next time you pause before making a snap judgment. The deepest message for today is this: true freedom of choice doesn't come from having more options. It comes from understanding the invisible forces that shape the options you see in the first place. By understanding biases like the anchoring effect, you don't just get smarter, you get freer. You are moving from being a passive participant in your life, pulled along by the first numbers and pieces of information you encounter, to being a conscious decision maker. You are the one who can identify, question, and reset the cognitive anchors to shape your own reality. If this journey into the mind has sparked your curiosity, subscribe to Psych Blueprint. We're dedicated to bringing you evidence-based insights to help you master your own brain and architect a more intentional life. My question for you today is, what is one anchor you now realize is influencing your life right now? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a conversation. Thank you for taking this deep dive.